we'll move on to DOMS then. So DOMS, they actually link to paper on DOMS. So delayed onset muscle soreness. So if you're unaware what that is, basically, you know when you do like a big session, for example, if you've done, if you're an absolute anarchist and you've done German volume training.
10 times 10 squats.
Yeah, literally, German volume training. Yeah. So
I think everyone's been there at one point.
And your legs are in shit state. They've linked to paper here on 17 subjects, so very small. And it was a double-blind, randomised, controlled crossover. The paper did suggest a potential benefit, but the paper itself was pretty specific in terms of, you can obviously look at this in the show notes. Not the evidence overall wasn't exactly amazing.
Yeah. I mean, once again, this kind of goes hand in hand with pain. DOMS at the end of the day is pain, so it's very hard to gauge. However, there are certain markers you can check, such as things like levels of creatine kinase, if I've pronounced that right.
I know
so you can actually see, is there something physical that's going on here, or is it all in the mind? But for a lot of the evidence I've seen in regards to turmeric on stuff like this, it's been like a pain scale. So you literally point to so after this supplement, how much pain are you in? Point to a frowny face, a regular looking face, or a happy face.
Very perceived feeling-ish.
Yeah, it's sort of,
Yeah, I get you.
Exactly. So it's a bit difficult.
They also cite a paper on gut inflammation. So back to the inflammation thing, but obviously gut's a little bit different. It is a rodent study, and it does suggest to help with the effects of IBS. It's pretty weak, though, and we do need more on that in terms of gut inflammation in general.
Human studies?
Yeah, basically. We also found a 2018 meta-analysis on this. The paper found current evidence suggests that curcumin has a positive, albeit not statistically significant effect compared to placebo on IBS symptoms. However, current findings are based on a considerably limited evidence base with marked heterogeneity. And we've said before, heterogeneity is variability. So lots of variance in the results there. And that's true because the fact they've only cited a rodent study, and then this other meta-analysis basically said there's not a lot of data to go off. It just shows we do need more on gut inflammation as itself. So that as a claim is a very weak claim, so I won't rush out and buy it for gut inflammation. I mean, if you actually look at the paper, to take us one step further and show how limited it actually is, they ended up with a pretty limited result base. So when a meta-analysis does, they normally start with like all the papers they can find, and they have to go through a process of getting them down. So there'll be things like, I don't know, they might get rid of all animal studies. They might get rid of all studies that don't have a placebo, because if you've not got a placebo, they can be biased. They might go, right, we're not going to include those in our meta-analysis. So this one, they actually reviewed 17 papers. 5 of them, only 5 were eligible to be used, and then finally they only had 3 included in the meta, so I won't even call it a meta-analysis, it's just 3 papers.
I know, that's a bit of a dodgy, that's a bit of shit really, why even call that a meta?
Well exactly, because people will look at that and go, oh, it's a meta-analysis, hello, here we go, big boy, whereas it's actually only got 3 papers that actually included. So
I mean, just to kind of like, I've seen meta-analysis before on things like BCAAs of all things. It's been like over 100 papers alone in that one meta-analysis. For this to only have that amount is quite shocking.
Yeah.
But we do live in a society.
We do live in a society where turmeric does not seem to help gut inflammation as it stands on paper. We'll move on to cholesterol levels and blood lipids. So, got a juice one here. So they've actually cited the paper again on their website, 2017. So, efficacy and safety of turmeric and curcumin in lowering blood lipid levels in patients with cardiovascular risk factors, a meta-analysis of randomised controlled trials. So once again, you've got to notice straight away in the title, there is a specific target there. So they're looking at people with cardiovascular risk factors. So while they did find some benefit, as most of these papers are seeming to find some benefit, especially if they claimed on their website, of course they would show that. There were some clear limitations with this paper, one of them being that all of the subjects were Asian. So I think we spoke about it on...
It's one population.
Yeah, we spoke about it on the previous episode, saying how if you only look at one population, there's a lot of factors that can come into play that can affect the results.
Yeah.
Just for example, the environment in that area. So we've got to look at more populations. Some data was also obtained indirectly, which could also affect accuracy. And they did conclude, due to uncertainties related to dosage form, dose and medication frequency, it is premature to recommend the use of turmeric or curcumin in clinical settings. So it's interesting because that is one they've cited, and it basically concludes that, it's not amazing in a nutshell. Once again, it's showing promise, but there needs to be more. Again, it's just... Yeah, it's going to be a bit, feel like a record player.
I'm more interested in it from the point of view of things like inflammation and arthritis in particular. But as I said, I think at the same time it can be a double-edged sword, especially if you are, highly affected by things like placebo And nocebo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If we move up to, so I've actually got a later paper. So the one they quoted was 2017. I've got one here from 2019 because I'm just that much better than them. It's a systematic review and meta-analysis of randomised controlled trials on the effects of turmeric and curcuminoids. Fucking hell, they've added a bigger word, haven't they? On blood lipids in adults with metabolic diseases. So once again, it's targeting those individuals. And the paper did actually address things like bioavailability. They said that previous studies have shown that formulated curcumin possesses higher bioactivity in comparison with curcumin, which is what we said at the start there. Makes a big difference. The meta-analysis could not prove the theory that, the theory I just basically, let me just say that again to make it clearer. So they obviously mentioned the theory of it being better when you have it with things like piperine, etc. But they couldn't prove it in the actual meta-analysis when they stated it because of the notable variability and the small number of trials. Yeah, so at the moment, even they couldn't really be too strong in it. And that's something they also mentioned further on, that the heterogeneity was a huge limitation in terms of the paper as a whole. Once again, being done solely on the Asian population. But if you think about it, it's not too different. I mean, it's only a couple of years after the other meta-analysis, so unless there was loads of other studies done at that time, there's obviously not going to be much different. It did show promise once again, but once again, we're going to need more, I'd say.
We always need more, no matter what.
Give me more. They also mentioned a couple on skin health. That's one I've seen quite a few times, especially like on, I don't know, some of these more Gucci products, designer products. They like to go skin health because people who tend to buy designer products tend to be very, what's the word? I don't know what the word.
Holistic.
Yeah, maybe holistic. Yeah, you could say holistic.
Appeal to nature. Yeah, more likely appeal to nature kind of people.
Influencer.
And, yeah. These kind of people. God, I feel awful for saying this. It sounds like I'm being very judgmental, but rather than having someone that says this is backed by science and says it's like, no, this has the root of Dave inside it. Therefore
No,
it's going to
the
be
root
effective.
of Dave, the root of Roger.
The root of Roger, sorry.
Yeah, from a tree in Bolton.
I was halfway there.
Get it right, mate.
I was
It's
halfway
a very
there.
important route. If this is your first episode, you have absolutely no idea what that means. So yeah, go back and listen to the rest of the series and you'll find out what the root of Roger is.
It sounds like a math formula.
It does, doesn't it? If we go back on to skin health though, there is some initial promise with some of the papers. So there was one paper, a randomised trial, and it did use 100 participants, and it was a very low dose of turmeric actually, which is interesting. The thing is, you have to remember that even when papers have very low dose, and you think, oh, this product's got loads more, you can't automatically assume that even though there's more in it, it's better. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because we've looked at
Bell
papers in the
curves and all
past where, for example, 300 milligrams of something would do something, but then 900 would do nothing. So you've got to, just because it's using a very low dose doesn't automatically mean that everything else that's got loads in will be fine. It'll do the job. That's not the case. Okay, you've got to be careful with that interpretation. And that paper there in particular, they concluded with, we need more randomised trials, as fucking every paper seems to have said, with larger sample sizes and longer treatment duration. We also have a 2016 systematic review on the clinical evidence on skin health. And there is actually some evidence both on taking it orally, so obviously consuming turmeric like normal, and actually topically, it's actually applying it to your skin, which is not something I don't know if you put it in your bath, it'd look quite dirty, wouldn't it? Probably like a mud bath. I would have thought. Very pleasant. Not something I do.
You might
anyway.
end up like coming out looking like, I don't know, Dale Winton afterwards. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Or some other kind of orange looking fella.
And I'll read a little extract out from this paper then, the one I just mentioned there. So, although it has been used for centuries in many parts of the world to treat skin diseases, its efficacy as an alternative or adjunctant to traditional treatments has not yet been proven. Dermatologists should be aware of the clinical studies that examine the use of curcumin-containing products as an alternative to skincare therapies. So basically saying proceed with caution when you use it, because as I said, they know it's been used a lot in certain parts of the world. You'll always see it. Maybe, I don't know, when you see it sounds really, I need to be careful what I say. They get like the little wooden bowls and you see them like mashing up shit, and the little bowl, put a bit of water in there, a bit of powder, and they start mashing it with a little wooden, what's it, fucking, that's like a little spice grinder thing, isn't it?
Oh, a mortar and pestle.
That's the fucking one. Yeah, so you see them use like little wooden ones, don't you, in some like videos and like villages and stuff around the world, and then they'll like apply it to their skin or something. That's the sort of stuff you see. But unfortunately, the reason they probably do it is appeal to nature, tradition. That is something they've done for years.
It's part of ritual, etc., stuff like that.
But
yeah.
So once again, if you've got shit skin, don't rush out and buy turmeric thinking it's gonna save the world.
Another thing about turmeric, just because I found this earlier on, or at least with regards to curcumin, let's say, is there is some evidence to now this is important. This is in vitro. In vitro, there is limited evidence that shows that basically it can actually, in high doses, interfere with your DNA structure.
Wow.
Or it may cause damage to your DNA.
Do you want to quickly explain what in vitro is, Tom, just for people who are not aware?
Yeah, so in vitro is basically where an experiment is done outside of its usual habitat. So the easiest way to say this is when we're human trials, it would just be on a human. But in vitro would be like fucking pouring a protein shake into a petri dish even. That's basically it. That's in vitro.
Yeah,
where it's outside of its usual like environment.
Yeah, it's normally in a lab environment, isn't it?
Yeah, it's usually not the most reliable, depending on the context of it. But it was something I did find interesting.
That's quite interesting. Yeah. I'll have to keep an eye on that. I also found a paper here from 2020, Tom. Now, I know we've got a lot of sports listeners. A lot of people are into their fitness, like to get hench. So I've got one that says the effects of curcumin supplementation on sport and physical exercise, a systematic review. So I've got a few key points on the paper here, so bear with me. Let's see if I can get this out in one go. Otherwise, we'll have another behind the scenes video. So we've got some key points on this paper then. I'll go rattle through them basically. So 11 original papers were eligible and were included in this review. So that's obviously a lot more than the 3 that the meta-analysis stated earlier, which is a good start. And all the selected studies are mostly randomised. So there was 8 of those that are mostly randomised. There was 8 that were crossover. And then we've got 8 which were conducted with adult participants, where the samples were comprised of just male individuals. And that was not 8 of those. Sample size and time of intervention varied from 8 to 47 participants. So across the board, not a very high sample size really, especially if we look at the lower end. And it was from 1 day to 3 months. So there's huge variance there in time, time taken these products. The used curcumin dosages varied from 0.01 grams to 6 grams a day. And curcumin was administered either in isolation or associated with other compounds. So that's once again formulated or unformulated, as we spoke about earlier. And the kinds of exercise performed varied between aerobic, so 7 of those, and resistance, where there was 4 of those. And they were all human studies as well, to note, which is important. And straight away, before we even go to any conclusions, the variance there is pretty big. Even across just 11 papers, there's a lot of difference in doses, time taken, even the training methodology, so that you'd proceed with caution just knowing those key points. But we'll go ahead and see what they said. So the evidence presented indicates that curcumin supplementation in human beings is likely safe and beneficial for sport and physical activity due to the reduction of inflammation and oxidative stress, reduction of pain and muscle damage, improved muscle recovery, sports performance, psychological and physiological responses. So lots to take away there from that little statement. Sounds quite good, but as I said, is it strong evidence overall? Sample sizes were quite small, lots of variance in doses.
Yeah, I'm not, from a sports perspective, I'm not really convinced, to be honest with you.
No, not really. I mean, so yeah, I won't go over it. I mean, once again, they actually also added, so they've literally almost, how do I put it, like copied the other study that we mentioned earlier. Is that researchers also added that it's not considered a sport supplement with level A evidence, therefore more studies are needed to confirm the results, to establish a safe and effective dosage, because the problem is that dosage was so varied. How do you know what's effective? How do you know what's safe overall?
It's usually more popular in like a general overall health kind of like non-prescription pain stuff, etc. Yeah, medication.
So, wowee, Tom, we've just rattled through loads of papers. If you're still with us, congratulations.
Yeah,
you've done a sterling job.
I mean, like, there is lots of evidence on it.
Yeah,
it's just that it's not the best quality.
No, the sample sizes are way too small.
Yeah,
way too small. We also, what we need more importantly, Tom, is we need a clear indication of effective dosing. Because at the moment, I don't even know what dose I'd recommend for certain things.
The most, when I usually see it on what's on the label for most things, it's usually, keyword being usually, 500 milligrams, like you've got capsule form or spoonfuls, etc.
Then take 2 at a time.
I've seen it from like 1 to 2 to 3 times a day. I suppose it depends on what your kind of goal is.
That's the problem, isn't
even
it?
I'm not 100%
There's-
sure
there's-
on what dose they're
There's no
recommending.
recommended dose for each different thing. Like it's not the paper. Even on the Turmeric Company website, they linked. They had a little bit of extract saying dose recommendations for different things, and it was like 4 or 5 different sort of things you could be going through, like gut health, skin, whatever. But the papers they linked were just like one tiny trial with 17 study, and they said, well, this one said 750 milligrams, so that's what we're going to say you should have if you've got. But it's like, well, no, you can't. That's just one tiny paper.
And then there's the pepper as well, the black pepper, the piperine, however it's fucking pronounced.
I mean, both these products we spoke about do
well.
put it in there because they're the designer products, aren't they? They're not like you're cooking.
But I mean, if I go to something like examine.com where they compile all this evidence into what they kind of suggest, they do recommend, pretty much what we just said actually, like around 500 milligrams 3 times a day, 15 to 20 milligrams of piperine as well. Oh, sorry, like 5 to 6 milligrams of black pepper. I'm just going to say black pepper with each dose as well. Now, 5 to 6 milligrams, that is like half of a little finger now. That's a tiny amount. Tiny amount.
If you are listening to this and you are maybe interested in turmeric supplementation, I would basically say probably avoid those designer products because they're ridiculously overpriced for what they do potentially. But if you look at things like My Protein, for example, if you go on the website, you can get a month's supply for $9.99, which is obviously a lot more affordable. They do capsules with 1,000 milligrams, so you just pop a capsule. 1,000 milligrams seems like quite a decent dose from what I've seen anyway. I mean, I can't be confident with what I say really.
Yeah.
And then they've also got 10 milligrams of the black pepper shiz inside as well.
I mean, if it's something you're going to try it yourself, I would recommend like moving away from the shops and actually just going for the tubs, the capsules.
Yeah, it's so much cheaper.
Make sure you've got black pepper with it.
Because them designer ones, the problem is they're very social media heavy. Like I constantly, the annoying thing about this podcast is when we do the research for it is that because we're typing in all these words, that social media assumes we're interested. So I end up getting about 15 adverts for fucking turmeric at night on my feed, and it's a nightmare.